Many times we cannot change our habits because we're so fixated on don't do this.
Mhm.
Do we have that self-confidence and positive self-talk? So if I'm confident and say I will do something, I've already mitigated self-doubt.
So we want a good habit. That's when we have to change. We want
That's
to change
correct.
our habits. We got to change our thoughts. Habits will follow.
Because the more time we dwell on these negative activities, the less likely we're going to achieve our priorities.
Welcome back. We're glad you've joined us for episode 5 of ReedFlections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. I'm Art Calderon. I'll be steering us through our conversation today with Reed Nyffeler, my friend. Reed, you're a husband, you're a father. You share a lot of your time, talent, and resources with people and organizations all over the community, really all over the world. You're CEO of a fast-growing global franchise firm right here, headquartered here in the heartland of America. You have a lot of personal and professional experiences to share with those eager to live a life on purpose. Now, today, episode 5, going to be a great episode, as they all are. Let's recap the first 4, all right? We talked about faith in God, we talked about family, we talked about productivity, and finally, enjoyment and rest. Next is developing habits. We talked a little bit about actions and how important it is and how loud our actions speak. I think our society is real big on that, and it's important. It's important to know, to be known by what you do. However, Reed, you said you wanted to understand habits, and in order to understand habits, you wanted to examine thoughts. So, in what ways do your thoughts impact your habits?
Yeah, and so if we kind of go back to those first 4 episodes, we talked about priorities, and really our thoughts should be oriented towards those priorities. We took the time and effort to prioritize. And so, however, if we don't prioritize our thoughts around our priorities, then our habits will be defaulted, right? And I think if we look at habits, we're governed by our daily habits. Whether you wake up at first thing in the morning and you grab breakfast, brush your teeth, head into work, that's your habit. And you're either doing that because that's what your mom taught you to do at very early ages, or you decided to do it.
Right.
One is the default to whatever your mom established as a habit, or your parents established as a habit, to one you chose.
Mhm.
And so then as we age and become adults, we can choose our habits. Now, sometimes we'll default to the ones we already knew. And so then if we're going to choose our habits, that should be our thoughts. And so that's why we're starting there and saying, okay, what would I change my habit to? And that should organize to our priorities. And that's how the two tie together. Once we spend our time on our priorities, we should orient our thoughts towards those priorities so that we can develop over time habits that become a process towards those priorities.
So the habits don't just happen all of a
That's
sudden.
right.
You have to start thinking about it and and prioritize them in your mind with your thoughts first.
What doesn't always happen is you're thinking about what habits you want to have. Sometimes we just default. We just accept things that are there because they were inherently there, not thinking, wait a minute, I just developed this habit naturally, and I didn't think about the habit I wanted.
So we want a good habit. That's when we have to change. We want
That's
to change
correct.
our habits. We got to change our thoughts. Habits will follow.
And then our thoughts should be oriented towards our priorities. So if we've spent the
Right.
time and effort determining in order our priorities, in my case, it's faith, as we mentioned before, family second, and then third, productivity or work, and then fourth, ultimately, enjoyment or rest. So I should say, okay, that is what I'm trying to work towards. My habits should support this. And in order for my habits to support that, my thoughts need to originate there. And so that's why the power of thoughts start, because my habit is a byproduct of my thoughts and ultimately a series of steps we'll talk about in subsequent episodes, but it starts in thoughts.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Very good. Again, if you have a habit and you have priorities and you realize they don't align, change your thoughts first to match your priorities, and then you can create some habits to fall in line.
And some people have unhealthy thought life originating, right? So you may be like, hey, I've never accomplished my priorities. I just can't do it. I don't know that I can't do it. Well, already, just when I said you had never, can't, and the comment that I had, instead of saying, I will and I can, right? And so I will do this. And so many times we don't think about our thought life and we have a bad thought life. So no matter what goal we're trying to achieve or accomplish, our thought life is broken. And so we're applying a priority or a goal to a broken system. And so that's where our thoughts start. And so the first is self-confidence. One thing that, people have always said, even at an early age, you're highly confident. Well, that to me is a way to throw an objective out there that I'm going to achieve. If I say I will do something instead of I'll try, and just that simple language change
Uh-huh.
from will to try. If I say I will do something, that puts a challenge out there for myself. And so then saying, am I a man of my word that I will do that? Or have I already given myself an out by saying I'll try
Yeah.
to do something?
Yeah.
And I'm excusing that. And so then people say, well, that's super confident. Well, it's a challenge for myself. It's not for the other person, because I'll remember what I said more likely than the person that listened to me will remember what I said
Right.
in most instances. And so the first thing is do we have that self-confidence and positive self-talk? So if I'm confident and say I will do something, I've already mitigated self-doubt, saying, well, I can't or never. And so that's where that thought starts there. If my priority is saying, I want to put my faith first, instead of saying, I will try to put my faith first, or I never have time to put my faith first, or I can't do it, I don't know enough. I said, I will put my faith first. That's a thought. I will put my faith first. Then that's the first step, is changing the language in our mind. And so to, spend a little more time on that thought, maybe you're a person, and in your name, in your mind, think of a movie, and your favorite movie. If there's a negative ending to the movie, the hero dies, right? Or ends in unceremonious life, we're like, that movie sucked. It was not very good, right? I mean, we just don't like watching that movie.
I love those kind of movies.
That's right. However, my wife loves Hallmark movies, and the script is always the same.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, they got together at the end. I'm like, no, you're kidding, right? They didn't decide, hey, this isn't going to work out.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I mean, how many dating relationships likely end up where this is the first time they've met, and 100% of the time they get together. I
In
mean,
a
I don't know.
cabin, up in the woods somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's the script every time, and it's a happy ending.
Yeah.
And we always want to watch a movie with a happy ending, but we hate the movies with a negative ending. So how does that correlate to our mindset? Well, how many of our minds end always with a happy ending? Instead, we live governed by our greatest fear, right? And so we're afraid, I won't make that decision because what happens negatively if that ends there? And then we start spiraling out of control negatively. Like, well, let's play out that Hallmark scenario. Well, I'm not going to live out a Hallmark movie lifestyle. I'm going to instead say, well, if I ask that girl out, she might say no, and she may not like what I'm wearing, and whatever the case might be, and we have this negative movie, and then I'm going to be forever alone, right? And we just ran a negative script.
No Hallmark movie for me.
No Hallmark movie for me. And that's what the script are running in our mind. That's why thoughts are powerful. Conversely, if we say, hey, you know what? If I ask that girl out, Hallmark movie in my mind, and it's positive, and said, if they say no, at least I've learned. Now there's clarity around that relationship.
And wouldn't you say that as parents, when we create that system, you said system, of thoughts in children, or as leaders, people that we lead, we help to create those thoughts so that when they're not directly with us, they're going to think that way. They're going to think negatively, or if we empower them to think positively, they're going to think positively, and they're going to battle that self-doubt. Right.
That's right.
You and I have talked a little bit about personal championship, right? And how self-doubt will impede those personal championships. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So again, with regard to personal championships, we should visualize ourselves being successful in our priorities, not looking at the things that are impeding that. So personal championship would be, okay, so if I intend, my second priority is family, to be a father and a husband, what does a personal championship look like that, right? That I love my wife well, that I invest in my kids, and they're ultimately successful in life. And so I was having this conversation this last weekend with an individual, and I said, my job as a parent is not to make sure that my children in my presence do everything that I would expect. My job as a parent is when I'm not there, they're making good decisions.
Yeah.
Is to condition them to train so that when I'm not there, I'm doing that. So that starts with thoughts. Saying what is, as a parent, to invest in the thoughts of my children, them to say, what is the best thing I can do with my time right now? Instead of saying, what tragedy should I avoid that I'll be embarrassed to talk to my parents about? And so that is ultimately begins in the mind, saying, okay, think positively. What is the best use of my time instead of don't do this? And so I think, again, it's positive language. And again, our thoughts should be around positive language in alignment with our priorities. That's really the central message here is, my objective is to accomplish my priorities. My thoughts should have positive language on how should I achieve that. Many times we cannot change our habits because we're so fixated on don't do this, right? That's in our mind. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be spending my time on X, Y, and Z. I shouldn't. However, we never think about the things that distract us from our priorities when we're fixated on our priorities. So, you look at professional athletes. The time where they are the most focused on their achievement is at practice. right? If they are trying to be, let's say, Michael Phelps, and he wants to win Olympic gold, his thoughts were around receiving that gold on his neck. And then at practice, he was concentrating on every stroke that accelerated his swimming.
He doesn't wait till the actual meet.
Right.
He does that when he's practicing. He's thinking that.
That's exactly right. His thoughts are around, okay, I should be thinking about winning that championship. Instead, he's not thinking about, man, that other swimmer is really good. Or the world record's just unachievable. Or there's no way I can achieve the gold. Now, which way is he more likely to win the gold? When he can visualize it on his neck, or when he's thinking about his competitor? And we do that active comparison in our lives all the time. Instead of focusing on our priorities and what a personal championship is, we're looking at social media and saying, that is their priority and they received the championship and I'm less than, right? I'm not able to achieve that. Again, those thoughts are governing us towards a direction that will not change our habits to lead to personal championship. So instead of saying comparatively that I'm not there, we should look at it, a personal championship. What will make me a better version of myself tomorrow in alignment with my personal championship or priorities, that I can make a change today, and that change starts in our thoughts.
So a key principle, I guess, is that we could be a little bit better in our life. We can be a little bit better by focusing our thoughts on the priorities. We've already decided what our priorities are. We focus our thoughts in there, and then from that, we create habits that lead to the vision being completed, the personal championship. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think we need to break that down, right? It could be overwhelming. How do I overnight change my whole mentality, right? I've grown up, and some of you, first things I would say is look at your first thought. So start there. Don't start with all your thoughts. Start with your first thought. Is my first thought naturally going to be negative or positive? So sometimes it's positive intent. Some people will always, first thought is negative intent. Whatever information I'm receiving, my thought is that must be negative. They must not like me, negative intent. They're trying to take power from me, negative intent. They want me to be perceived as less than, negative intent. So start with your first thought. When you get new information or a new idea or anything new, what is your first thought? So this is how we change our thought life. Positive intent. Yeah. So when someone says something to me, when I read something, when I see an image of someone, don't think negative intent, think positive intent.
Oh, that's got to be hard when so many times, especially like yourself in a leadership position, when so many times you come at it with a positive, you assume positive intent, they let you down. You come back again, you assume positive intent, they let you down. How do you stay focused to maintain that positive intent? After people are people, they're gonna let you down.
So the power of thoughts are no one really knows our thoughts, right? No one can really read our mind. I try to read my wife's mind, but quite frankly,
doesn't work, does it?
No, after 26 years, no clue. Yeah. So no one can read our mind,
right.
And conversely, maybe she can read mine a little bit better. Probably. But nonetheless, I think nobody knows our thoughts. So that's why it's not a matter of anybody else. I think we think that the thoughts are driven by somebody else, but that's all crafted in our own mind because we have not externally communicated any information. It's all our perception and how we receive the information. So again, let's say, I'll give an analogy or an example. So let's say we look at a social media post, right? We can take and say, they did that because they're trying to attack me, right? And maybe they very well are, but we can assume positive intent. It's like,
good for them.
Good for them,
yeah.
Right? Positive intent, right? Yeah. I'll give another example. Let's say we're sitting in a classroom and the teacher is saying, hey, you guys struggled at the test last time and you really need to pull it together. Instead of saying, oh, she's always testing me and making me feel like I'm inferior and I'm not smart enough. Instead of saying, no, she's trying to develop me.
Yeah.
Positive intent. The teacher's job, their goal, their objective is that I can go out in society and know this content.
Yeah.
And they're trying to help me be better, not question my intelligence.
Right.
Negative intent would say, she's always saying I'm not smart enough. I'm just not capable of doing it. No, I'm trying to make you better, right? Positive intent. A third example. We're at, the best athletes, again, using athletics as an analogy. They can say that coach is like, well, you don't see what I do. You don't see that I'm blocking this individual a good job. You're asking this one time when this one guy got by me, right? Well, of course, we can always assume that they're trying to question our abilities and everything else. But instead, that coach is saying, I want you to be better.
Right.
I'm assume positive intent. They're not here to tell me I'm not going to make the team and I'm not going to be good in life. They're trying to make me better. And that's what a true coach does. So that's where thoughts come in. We can be a self-coach. And if we're waiting for someone to encourage us in a direction, we're going to be waiting a long time. However, in our thoughts, if we can take that first thought and we can say, I'm going to assume positive intent, and I'm then assume positive intent, and maybe you do that right out of the gate, maybe you're good at that, then add positive language in our mind. So if it's positive intent first, it would say, okay, I can, my priority is faith. Well, that person just has a stronger faith in me. That's negative intent. Say instead, wait a minute, I can have a better faith. And this is an example that they're sharing with me that might be able to enhance my faith. Next, positive language. What can I do to enhance my faith if that's my first priority? Well, an example, I just started this week with my son. There's a verse of the day. And so each and every day I drive him to school. And so he pulls up the verse of the day. And I said, that's a way that can help enhance his faith at 11 years old. So that's one thing of an activity I'm already doing, saying I want to assume positive intent. I don't want him to question his faith in there, but he can bring a single verse. And I ask him, what's your interpretation of this verse? At which point then we have a discussion around that, and it's positive language. Great, you learned something today. Instead of saying, yeah, you didn't know that.
Yeah.
And
now,
so
some
that's
people
the
would
language.
say that that's naive, Reed, because I'm just being realistic when I walk in there, and I'm just saying, I'm preparing for the worst case scenario so that I can be prepared when things go south. And to think that it's always going to be good and people are going to, people have positive intent, that, you're just not being realistic. That's just being naive. What would you say to that?
Yeah, and they'll say, then I get burned because I'm expecting things of other people. And that is really in our mind and ourself. So again, we're starting with thoughts. We have not interacted with anybody else. That's subsequent conversations, right? It's first in our mind. So who are we really letting down? Ourselves, right? I mean, we are our only audience in our mind. There's no other person listening. We have not even formulated a word that's the next episode. It's truly in our mind. Now, if we understand the power of thoughts, that will govern our words, right? And so in our minds, and that's the trap here, is we think this is external. It's purely internal. What are we thinking about ourselves? Immaterial of any point. When we're sitting alone in our rooms, when we're sitting at our desk, when we're looking at our screen on our phone at an airport and nobody's around, what are we thinking of ourselves? That's where that thought starts. And so then we can condition that, as we'll learn in subsequent episodes, to say, okay, now if I'm only Pollyanna and completely positive, one, it's disingenuous if I don't really believe that. Number two is I could be taken advantage of. And so we need to use discernment.
Right.
I'm merely talking about when we're thinking about ourselves and our ability to achieve our priorities, are our thoughts positive and going to drive that? Because the more time we dwell on these negative activities, the less likely we're going to achieve our priorities. So if we're constantly saying, this is the reason I can't, this is the reason, well, we've just wasted countless minutes and time to do that. Let's use an example. If we believe we can lose weight, right? If that's something we believe we can do, and we don't take time to think of all the reasons we shouldn't work out or shouldn't improve our diet or all the distractions, which I'll get to that in a second, but truly believe it, we say, hey, I know I can lose weight, and I know if I go work out for 30 minutes a day and I have these meals, I'm going to do it, right? That's the power of a plan, right? I mean, that's the power of all these weight loss companies. They basically give you a plan, but you still have to do the activity.
Yeah.
I can learn about exercise. I can reorganize my calendar in effort to give myself time to be able to do it, right? And so it starts with a thought about our ability to lose weight.
Yeah.
It's much, much, much more about our thoughts, because that precipitates our words, which precipitates our actions.
Yeah.
So we will never go work out if we don't believe we can lose weight.
Yeah.
And that starts in our thoughts. And so if our priority is to get healthy, then our thoughts should be around what a healthy lifestyle would look like. Then we communicate that healthy lifestyle to others, which is our subsequent chapter or podcast. And then ultimately our actions become healthy actions that lead to that healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. Now, Reed, you're very accomplished. You're very talented. You've done a lot of things that people look up to and have benefited from. Surely, you've also struggled with self-doubt.
So I'll give you two examples. The first one was early in my life. I remember being in junior high and I really hadn't found my place in life, right? I didn't know, I was like, okay, am I going to appeal to the teachers that want me to get good grades? Am I going to appeal to the coach who wants me to be a standout athlete? Am I going to appeal to, the general population that wants me to be their friend, right? And so I couldn't figure out where I wanted to be. And that's where the priorities came in. I said, well, who am I going to be, right? Who is Reed? What was I created for, purpose on purpose, right?
Somehow you had a presence of mind to say, that's my decision.
That's right. So I recognized that either someone else is going to define that for me, or I could define that for myself. That's where my priorities came from. So I had a tremendous amount of self-doubt around that. And then I realized, and then I said, well, I can't be a great student. I'm not smart enough, right? Self-doubt. I can't be the most sociable because I just don't have the personality that appeals to people. I can't be the best athlete because I'm not tall enough, strong enough, quick enough, whatever the
Mhm.
case might be. And on the flip side of that, I said, and that's negative talk, self-doubt, right? Instead, I said,
Did you realize that at the
at the
time?
time, I'm sitting there thinking, well, what is that going to accomplish when I look at all the way I'm measuring myself against others in my peer group, which I mean, we're all in our teenage, just nascent teenage time in junior
Yeah.
high. And I mean, many times those thoughts are impeding. And we can make a decision that we continue to hold those thoughts for the rest of our lives, because I think junior high is a transitionary time, at least in our thoughts. Or we can decide, whether we're in our 40s as I am,
Mhm.
that I can pivot away from that I've long held on to change. And so at that time, I said, what am I looking at what I don't have? I think that's a terrible way to look at it, because I can't change my height. I can't change my quickness. I can't change my ability to have rote memorization for the sake of a test in
Mhm.
particular subjects. And quite frankly, do I really want all these people to be my friend? And what time would allow for that anyways?
Right.
Instead, I said, what do I have? Right. And as I really distilled it all the way down, everything I would consider average, I thought this was an interesting analogy that happens at the same time. Back in the 30s and 40s, there was a ton of plane crashes, and they couldn't figure out why. And so they did all these studies, and then they realized that they had built the cockpit of a plane for an average size human. And what they realized is no one person had more than 8 average metrics. So some had super long arms and short legs. Some had long legs and short arms, but an average torso. And so all these things were there, and they realized, wait a minute, that's why they're crashing, because the short people could not see over the window because of average height. The tall people were hitting their head on the top, and they had to lean it over, all these other things.
Oh, yeah.
So what do? They made an adjustable seat.
Mm.
They simply adjusted to the life. And so that's the way I looked at life. I could
Yeah.
measure myself at that junior high stage against the best athlete, against the most gregarious person socially, to the smartest student, and always fail.
Mhm.
But then in the middle, where the average exists, which is all of us in one capacity or another, we're an average person,
Mhm.
what are the things I am capable of controlling? And the one thing I came down to always, and it's a still thing I hold on to now, is effort.
Mhm.
I knew the only thing that I can consistently improve, I couldn't make myself taller. I couldn't make myself stronger with any reasonable amount, right? But I definitely could put max effort every time. And that I realized applied universally. That could apply in my studies. I could do my absolute best. That applied in my athletics. I could do my absolute best. And to me, that was really eye-opening, that I said, what does my best look like if I'm putting in my best effort? Not how do I compare against those who are at top of their game?
Right.
And so that was then where I overcame that self-doubt. I said, I no doubt know that I can always do my best.
Mhm.
And so whether I win or lose, that will give self-doubt. But if I measure my success on giving my 100% best in everything I do, that'll alleviate that. So that's the first question of where I overcame self-doubt. So then a recent story. I just completed writing a book recently. And in fact, if you're interested, it'll be available here in the next 3 to 6 months or so. And that was self-doubt. I said, you know what? I'm not a writer. And quite frankly, if you've ever seen any of my writing, it's run on sentences, punctuation's terrible. And, quite frankly, as much of my speaking as you picked up on, right? Super funny book, I'm sure,
Oh,
because I'm
hilarious.
very
Yes.
funny.
Yeah.
However, poorly written likely. And so I'm not a writer. And so I thought there was a lot of self-doubt of that. And then who would want to read it, right? People aren't reading anymore, I would tell audiences. And I'd be like, that nobody reads books anymore. And something like 75% of people
They'll
after
listen to
college.
podcasts. What
Yeah,
is
yeah,
this
that's
about?
right. They're consuming content differently. However, I looked at it and I said, can I give my best? Back to
Uh-huh.
that original point.
Effort.
Yeah, can I give my best effort? I'm not going to be a prolific writer, right? I mean, there's countless authors that are always going to be better, but I shouldn't compare myself to those best authors. But will my best be something that I can accept? And that's positive self-thought. I thought, yeah, I'm going to put my best effort into it. And then it began to give me ability of how to write a book. And it was amazing. And this is the way we kind of bring this whole thought piece together. When we have positive thoughts, when we believe that we can do it and put in our best effort, that's when the ideas start flowing. And they call it writer's block. I'm blocked by my self-doubt, essentially. Self-doubt is your principal blocking, right? But when you say, I can do it, now you see opportunities. The world opens up, right? If you say, for example, I'll give another example that we're never going to be able to take my family on a vacation, right? That's self-doubt for people. I'll never have a job that can afford it. Our expenses are too high. We have all these other things. Instead of saying, wait a minute, what is a vacation? I can take my family on a vacation. Wait a minute, we can go camping. Oh, now we can go camping and we could drive 50 minutes and sure, I got to work on Monday, but I mean, we can camp Friday night and Saturday night. And there's a KOA campsite about 40 miles from here. And my friend has a tent. I'll borrow their tent. And I can go forage for wood. That'd be fun. And we've got a box of matches. Now it's feasible, right? Whereas I can never afford a vacation was our thought, and we had negative thought, to positive intent and thinking ahead, to now we're on a vacation at a campsite that is really encapsulating the fun. Whereas we could have that picture of that family on that beautiful vacation and say, I can never afford a vacation. And that is the manifestation of changing a positive thought, right? We assume positive intent. We then believe we can do it. And then the ideas begin to throw, and that's the flow. And that's the third step. So again, to kind of reiterate, first, when something new comes in, do we assume positive intent? And maybe you're struggling with negative thoughts right now. Just practice first, assume positive intent. Second, change your mental language and your disposition to believe you can do it. I can go on a vacation with my family. Third, let the ideas flow, right? Don't stop them. Let them flow. It's in your mind anyways. What does a vacation look like? Can I go 50 miles from now? Make it a small step forward, not a huge step, right? We don't have to have this global travel program, right? We can go camping, 50 miles away from our home for 2 nights on a weekend and get away. And then it becomes reality. And then we begin to build our confidence around that, right? We say, wait a minute, when I change my idea around something simple like a vacation, and then I assumed positive intent, and I had positive language, then now the ideas flow, and I see that manifest itself in a couple of weeks later and when I'm on a vacation with my family. And that's how you build your thoughts.
Outstanding. Well, all right, to recap, our first 4 episodes were about priorities. We've talked about priorities: God, our faith, family, work or productivity, and finally rest and enjoying rest and being purposeful about rest. And finally, we talked about habits and how our good habits have to start with our good thoughts. Our good thoughts start with our priorities. Bring us home, Reed.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that's important there is having additional people in your life to help with that. And so, sometimes it's the people around us that are constantly talking negative. And sometimes if they have negative thoughts, we're more likely to think negative things. So those we will know based on their language and words. And so it might be a first step for someone to say, am I around people that have similar priorities as me? Because if they don't have similar priorities, they're going to be going a different direction. That's going to lead to some form of separation at some point or another. Then we say, okay, if they have similar priorities, do they have similar thoughts? They may have similar priorities, but they may be really negative about those. So we want to have people come alongside, and that worked for me, right? I remember a specific example when I was in high school and I had decided to be a wrestler. And so there was a lot of kids on the team that are like, I can't beat that kid, whatever the case might be. And my coach came up to me and he said, hey, there's this tournament and, I know you're higher rated than the actual seating that I gave for you, but I knew one thing about you, Reed. It doesn't matter who's in front of you. You still think you could beat him. I said, well, that's probably pretty true because I'm going to give my best effort no matter what. Yeah. And he said, so around you, he invested in me positive thoughts. He said, I believe you can win because you believe you can win. And I know that I have these other people that have negative thoughts around their abilities. So I gave them an easier path to kind of build their confidence. And so again, here is someone that came alongside me and said, hey, I know you're going to give your best effort no matter what. And it doesn't matter who you're wrestling in that particular environment. You're going to give your best effort. And so that was someone that encouraged me at an early stage to do that. So get people around you that have the same priorities and that can encourage you positively toward that direction.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Reed, for helping us develop strong habits, starting with thoughts about ourselves. And thank you, listeners, for joining us here on ReedFlections, a podcast on life, leadership, and learning. Next time, we're going to talk about habit of clear communication and well-crafted words. Until then, I'm Art Calderon. Be purposeful.
And as always, here's my last word, Art. You know you love this part. So for those of you who have negative thoughts and are there's nothing more important than changing your mindset because your priorities will be invalidated by your self-doubt. So leave this podcast and say, I need to change my thoughts today. There's nothing more important because all your priorities are invalidated and will not be accomplished. Think positively about yourself, your future, and get alongside people that can come and encourage you in a positive way. Thank you, and we will see you next podcast.